All right, welcome back to The Hill. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. looking to throw a wrench, potentially, into the 2024 presidential election. He is expected to announce early next week that he'll be running as an independent. New polling suggests that this could spell trouble for both President Biden and former Trump. The new survey shows the two frontrunners at just over 30%, with RFK Jr. sitting at 14%. Elizabeth Vargas, come on in, joining us now to discuss. Hey there, Elizabeth. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, we made it on a crazy week. What do you make of that? I mean, 14%, you know, the PAC for RFK Jr. was saying they were at 17, 19, and we were like, yeah, but that's the PAC. This is a legitimate Reuters poll having him at 14.
Yeah, he's definitely appealing to a core group of voters. The question is where does he pull those voters from? It's interesting. I talked to a Republican strategist who said that he was up in New Hampshire, and I was asking him which of the Republican candidates might have a chance of coming close, at least, to former President Trump. And he said, actually, the most signs I saw in New Hampshire were for Bobby Kennedy. So it says something. He has an appeal. And a lot of people who are Trump supporters find Bobby Kennedy very appealing. We, in fact, know that a lot of Trump backers have been also backing Kennedy, perhaps as a spoiler. So maybe his decision to jump in as an independent will change things up. I don't know. It's interesting. I asked him, Blake, in the town hall that we had here on News Nation with him, that question of whether or not he would ever run as an independent. He said, absolutely not. I'm a Democrat. I was born a Democrat. We're a family of Democrats. He was very passionate about it, and he's now changing his tune.
You know, you mentioned that there's the thinking that maybe he actually does draw more from Republicans, in this case, potentially Donald Trump, than Democrats. We know his stance on vaccines, right?
Yes.
There was an interesting poll about COVID.
And
about
lots of conspiracies, by the way. There's lots of conspiracies.
Yeah. As we know. And so look at this poll, Elizabeth. Are you likely to receive an updated vaccine? This goes straight down party lines, basically. About 7 in 10 Democrats say yes. About 1 in 4 Republicans say no, and half the independents flip a coin for independents. So does it go to the point, you know, one of the things that he's known for, it lines up, you know, with maybe him drawing some support away from whoever the Republican nominee will be?
Hey, listen, the fact of the matter is the reaction and response governmentally, societally to COVID is something we are still seeing play out, still unfolding. I know that there's a big study and a big report about to come out about the impact it had on children. It is in the Democratic states who stayed closed longer have children who are further behind academically. It was not. It was a mistake, in other words, according to this upcoming report, to close these schools and keep them closed as long as we did. There is plenty to adjudicate and litigate about our COVID response. But, you know, President Trump has said those vaccines, you know, that was me. That was my administration. And he's right. He is the person. He is the person who funded and pushed for the development of these vaccines, which are widely seen worldwide as being effective, much more effective than the ones in China and the ones in Russia. So, but it's so interesting when it comes to getting those booster shots. Democrats really buy into it. Republicans don't.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
Even the deer know who's good for president. Look at that.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been almost completely ignored by both left and right-leaning cable news in the 2 weeks following the launch of his third-party presidential bid. Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, all of them have hardly uttered a word about the Kennedy campaign. 3 networks combined mentioned him just 6 times in the past 2 weeks. Now, it's status quo for the left-leaning outlets, which more or less pretended his Democratic primary challenge to Biden didn't exist. And while RFK was the toast of the town on Fox News for a while, they're now giving him the cold shoulder at the least, since he's now running against the eventual Republican nominee, heavily favored to be Donald Trump. But the partisan media on both sides ignore him at their own peril, because the latest fundraising and polling numbers suggest, whether they like it or not, RFK Jr. is going to be a factor in the 2024 race. Check out this staggering fundraising haul from Kennedy. According to a Kennedy super PAC, in just the first 6 hours after he launched his bid on October 9th, he raked in $11 million in 6 hours. Campaign coffers filling up fast. Poll numbers. PBS poll shows Kennedy drawing 16% of the vote in a hypothetical three-way race with Biden and Trump. In this one, Biden leading in that poll with 44% to Trump's 37%. If you're wondering who Kennedy might hurt more, Trump or Biden, it's seemingly Trump. Check out these numbers from the same poll, which show Biden leading by only 3 points in a matchup against only Trump. And you add Kennedy to the mix, according to this poll, Trump fares significantly worse. Mick Mulvaney, what do you make of this, and how significant do you think RFK Jr. will be?
Yeah, whether or not he's significant or not, everything I've seen sort of says that he's pulling equally from both sides. The polling data I saw, Dan, earlier this week was sort of a 45-45 race with Trump and Biden. And then with Kennedy, it's a 37-37 race with 16% to Kennedy, which is an exact 50-50 split in terms of stealing from both Biden and Trump. I don't think he's serious. I think it's sort of a straw man stalking horse. He's a protest vote. People who are Republican but don't want to vote for Trump say they'll vote for Kennedy on the poll. The same thing is true of Democrats. I'm not sure they pull the ticket for that individual, assuming he's on the ballot on Election Day. Keep in mind, it's really hard to get on the ballot. If you're not already starting the process to get on the ballot in states a year from now, you're unlikely to have your name on the ballot.
Yeah.
I have no idea if Kennedy's even begun that yet.
Scott Bolden, what do you make of it?
Yeah, real quick. Mick and I have seen that same poll, and we've been on a News Nation talking about that poll. But on your program, the data we've looked at, there are about 8 polls that show he pulls from the Republicans more than he pulls from the Democrats. He's an anti-vaxxer. He's a conspiracy theorist. And I think the Democratic Party is watching closely, but I don't think we're concerned about him pulling from the Biden campaign. It's more important who's going to be the Republican nominee, if it's not Donald Trump or if it is, and then how much of that does he pull if Kennedy stays in the race and can get on the ballot to be significant in some of the purple states or swing states? Can he be a factor in regard to the Electoral College, not so much winning the popular vote?
Mick Mulvaney and Scott Bolden, thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
The media pundits are going to tell you that we don't have any chance. They've given me a couple of first names. One of them is long shot candidate. And they say my impact is only going to draw votes from the other candidates. The Democrats are frightened that I'm going to spoil the election for President Biden. And the Republicans are frightened that I'm going to spoil it for President Trump. The truth is, they're both right. I have seen the polls that they won't show you. I've sat at the kitchen tables that they don't bother to visit. I've shaken hands with tens of thousands of invigorated Americans over the past 6 months who are excited about a change. And I can tell you, our campaign has ignited a movement that has been smoldering for years. And that's the real reason that the party elites in Washington and the insiders are terrified of my candidacy. There have been anti-establishment candidates before, but none of them who understands actually how to get the job done. Unlike President Trump, I've been fighting corporate corruption and suing government agencies for 40 years. I know how they work, and I know how to clean them up. And unlike any president since 1963, I will stand up to the military-industrial complex. I will cash in the peace dividend, and I'll bring our troops home with honor. I'll rebuild America's strength from the inside out. What really terrifies the elites, though, is not me. It's what I represent, a populist movement that defies left-right division. I am merely the bowsprit of a ship that is going to cut through the armadas of corruption, of secrecy, of lies. If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
The pundits have been lamenting, how do we get young people to engage again in politics? I see so many young people
who have now inflamed with my campaign.
I want to vote for Kennedy. That's why I came out today.
I support Mr. Kennedy because I believe in peace, not our military abroad as how we've been conducting it the past several decades. I support helping the little guy, and I think Kennedy's the guy to do that.
The reason why I support Kennedy is he advocates for our country to be healthy, anti-seed oils, anti-big pharma. We want our country to be in its #1 position and our healthiest position.
The problem I found is not the young people. The problem is what my generation, the old people, have done to politics.
I feel like he's the only one talking about the real issues. Got microplastics in all the water that we drink and all the food that we eat. And I just feel like he's not afraid to go away from like the corporate mumbo jumbo and speak the truth.
I really like Kennedy's message. His uncle was one of my favorite presidents of all time. I love studying him. And I think he can really reunite the United States.
The millennials and Gen Z are repelled by the toxicity, the pettiness, and more than anything else by the dishonesty. They want authenticity. The problem is the politics. I'm committed to inaugurating a politics that is worthy of their engagement.
I never felt like I belonged in the two-party system. I was either a little too left to be right or a little too right to be left. But here today at Independence Hall, I'm feeling right at home. So I want all the young people out there to know, I've been where you are. I've been disenchanted, I've been disenfranchised, I've said it's too crazy, I'm gonna sit this out. But the stakes are way too high to sit this cycle out. So if you have a cell phone with a camera and a Wi-Fi connection, you can get involved. Your voice deserves to be heard, and your voice is just as valid as everybody else's.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com. Trump locked down 3.3 million businesses. And you know, what did that do? It shifted everything to Amazon. 41% of the black-owned businesses that were closed during COVID will never reopen. A lot of those businesses had 3 generations of equity in them. I drove through Lee Harvard, which is one of the poorest districts in Cleveland, and it was a booming area 5 years ago. Today, every single one of those stores is boarded up. And, you know, I talk to people every day in the African-American community whose businesses were wiped out, and that's what happened. We shifted $4 trillion in wealth from the working poor and the middle class to the super rich in this country. We strip mined the black community of its equity during this pandemic. And, you know, how do you rebuild that now? That is the big issue for our country. How are we going to rebuild equity with the working poor in this country? If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com. Hey everybody, I'm standing here in front of the United States Supreme Court where the Missouri versus Biden decision is probably going to end up, and it's about free speech. The judge's decision specifically talks about how the Biden administration targeted me first, 2 days after it came into office, and I was censored by the Trump administration too, so this is nonpartisan. We actually fought a revolution, our ancestors, and we created this country so that people could say things about the government that the government doesn't like. And we need to be able to do that if we're going to keep our democracy. When I went to testify in this hearing, 102 congresspeople signed a letter demanding that I not be allowed to speak. So they were actually, and this is ironic, they were actually censoring a censorship hearing.
Respectfully requested that you rescind Mr. Kennedy's invitation to appear here due to his repeated and very recent statements.
The framers of our Constitution knew that democracy was a very inefficient system. They felt that it would give us the one thing that would give us an advantage over totalitarian systems was this capacity for the free flow of information and a complete lack of control of debate, so that ideas that would eventually mature into policies would be annealed in a furnace of debate and then rise through the marketplace of ideas rather than being dictated from above. And that's what would give the energy, the vibrancy, the vigor to democracy. If we lose that, not only do we lose our democracy in this country, but the entire world loses us as an example. We know that we're going to be able to have free speech again in this country because the first thing I'm going to do when I get into office on day one is to pass an executive order ordering all federal agencies to stop censoring speech. If you can give $5 or $10, please do that today, and let's make sure that we can recapture our country for ourselves and for everybody else in the world. If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
All right, welcome back to The Hill. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. looking to throw a wrench, potentially, into the 2024 presidential election. He is expected to announce early next week that he'll be running as an independent. New polling suggests that this could spell trouble for both President Biden and former Trump. The new survey shows the two frontrunners at just over 30%, with RFK Jr. sitting at 14%. Elizabeth Vargas, come on in, joining us now to discuss. Hey there, Elizabeth. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, we made it on a crazy week. What do you make of that? I mean, 14%, you know, the PAC for RFK Jr. was saying they were at 17, 19, and we were like, yeah, but that's the PAC. This is a legitimate Reuters poll having him at 14.
Yeah, he's definitely appealing to a core group of voters. The question is where does he pull those voters from? It's interesting. I talked to a Republican strategist who said that he was up in New Hampshire, and I was asking him which of the Republican candidates might have a chance of coming close, at least, to former President Trump. And he said, actually, the most signs I saw in New Hampshire were for Bobby Kennedy. So it says something. He has an appeal. And a lot of people who are Trump supporters find Bobby Kennedy very appealing. We, in fact, know that a lot of Trump backers have been also backing Kennedy, perhaps as a spoiler. So maybe his decision to jump in as an independent will change things up. I don't know. It's interesting. I asked him, Blake, in the town hall that we had here on News Nation with him, that question of whether or not he would ever run as an independent. He said, absolutely not. I'm a Democrat. I was born a Democrat. We're a family of Democrats. He was very passionate about it, and he's now changing his tune.
You know, you mentioned that there's the thinking that maybe he actually does draw more from Republicans, in this case, potentially Donald Trump, than Democrats. We know his stance on vaccines, right?
Yes.
There was an interesting poll about COVID.
And
about
lots of
whether you were likely
conspiracies,
to
by the way. There's lots of conspiracies.
Yeah. As we know. And so look at this poll, Elizabeth. Are you likely to receive an updated vaccine? This goes straight down party lines, basically. About 7 in 10 Democrats say yes. About 1 in 4 Republicans say no, and half the independents flip a coin for independents. So does it go to the point, you know, one of the things that he's known for, it lines up, you know, with maybe him drawing some support away from whoever the Republican nominee will be?
Hey, listen, the fact of the matter is the reaction and response governmentally, societally to COVID is something we are still seeing play out, still unfolding. I know that there's a big study and a big report about to come out about the impact it had on children. It is in the Democratic states who stayed closed longer have children who are further behind academically. It was a mistake, in other words, according to this upcoming report, to close these schools and keep them closed as long as we did. There is plenty to adjudicate and litigate about our COVID response. But, you know, President Trump has said those vaccines, you know, that was me. That was my administration. Right. And he's right. He is the person. He is the person who funded and pushed for the development of these vaccines, which are widely seen worldwide as being effective, much more effective than the ones in China and the ones in Russia. So, but it's so interesting when it comes to getting those booster shots. Democrats really buy into it. Republicans don't.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
Bobby Kennedy was the best one. Your grandfather and your uncle both hesitated on civil rights.
You know, my grandfather has been maligned in many, many ways. I've written a book that addresses those issues, including this defamation, which is utterly untrue, that he was a bootlegger, that At the beginning of World War II, he did oppose Americans' entrance into the war. It was at a time when nobody knew what was happening the final solution hadn't even begun in Germany at that time. Once the war started, he was not involved with the American firsters who were, pro-Germany. He lost his son during the war. His other son, John Kennedy, was missing in action and presumed dead for 10 days. Received the Purple Heart, the only American president who has. My uncles vigorously supported civil rights. Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte were in my house constantly, very, very close personal friends with my family, with my uncle. My father, with my uncle as Attorney General, integrated the South. I don't think there's any doubt about that record. They sent federal troops both to Ole Miss, to Oxford, Mississippi. They supported the marches in Selma. They worked very closely with Dr. King on the Voting Rights Act, which was passed immediately after my uncle's death at Alabama, the University of Alabama as well. They forced voting rights into those states. They dismantled the Jim Crow laws that had made black Americans second-class citizens, and they made America a true constitutional democracy for the first time in its history. They were in the middle of the civil rights battle, both my uncle and father. They were indignant about the way that black Americans were treated in the South, and I'm proud of their legacy.
Now, you're somebody who's been open about your struggles with drugs and alcohol and coming out of that. When you see the problem in California, all over the country, is there a way, can we do more?
Well, I mean, there's two issues. One is addiction and the other is homelessness. And I don't think that they're necessarily connected. My son, Connor, last night we were talking about this issue, and he pointed out that in West Virginia that there's more drug addiction per capita, there's more poverty per capita, and there's probably an equal amount of mental illness, and yet there's no homelessness problem. And it has to do with the availability of housing. Homelessness and addiction do not have to go hand in hand.
Right.
If you solve the housing issue, and one of the reasons in San Francisco that they have this terrible problem is because they have zoning laws that don't allow any high density housing. That contributes to the problem. For people who don't know San Francisco, there's a part of San Francisco that is like Fifth Avenue, and it is a shopping city. Tourists come all over the world, shop in Union Square the way they do in Fifth Avenue. I don't know if you've been up there recently, but I went up there a month ago, and every one of those stores is boarded up. It's just acre after acre of plywood.
Struggling to bounce back as retailers continue to flee. The exodus continues.
A lot of retailers have been pulling out of the city.
It's like if you shut down Fifth Avenue, I don't think people understand the cataclysm that has struck that city. The office space has a 65% vacancy, so it's a 35% occupancy rate. They built buildings 5 years ago for $330 million, and they're now selling them for $100 million. And it's hard to see how that city recovery, even with really good leadership.
What is different about the way you would handle San Francisco and certain issues in Los Angeles than what Democrats have done in this state?
I have ideas for how to handle those issues that people can go on our website. I think housing is a critical issue, and it's not just critical for people in San Francisco. What you do is you say, you change the tax code to penalize corporations who own over a certain number of homes, and you can do that in a million different ways. What we should be doing is we should be lifting the regulatory burden on small business and increasing it on large businesses across the board.
And no one's talking about this, which is interesting. The Republicans aren't talking about it. The Democrats aren't talking about it. You're the only candidate out there kind of bringing up these issues in this way.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's a great honor for me to join my friend Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar and all of you today. Thank you for coming from over 160 countries to our historic National Mall in Washington, D.C.
to celebrate world culture and our capacity for evolutionary, personal, and group transformation. I want to share with you some of my own personal story about transformation. I was a drug addict when I was a teenager, and I was addicted to heroin for over 14 years. And during that period, I was being run by an engine of self-will. I describe myself during that period as just a bundle of appetites that were constantly asking me to feed them. And all of those things were the service to self-will. And when I got sober, I had to make a choice about whether this was an addiction that was going to kill me. It was very clear. And that I had to make a dramatic choice to change my life from a life that was being governed by self-will to a life that was being governed by a power greater than myself. And you can call it God or by whatever name that you want. And I made that decision to turn my life over that. I had to, in order to do that, I had to break my life. I had to start very methodically in breaking my life, my everyday, down to a series of moral choices. God gives us time, but he breaks time into manageable units called days. And every day we get to start again in trying to put God's will in charge of self-will. And I had to break every day into a series of little choices, probably 40 choices a day. And each one now for me had a moral dimension. So do I get up on time when the alarm goes off, or do I stay in bed with my indolent thoughts? Do I make the bed? It's probably the most important choice that I make of the day. Do I hang up the towels after I shower? Do I put the water in the ice tray rather than putting the ice tray back in the refrigerator empty? When I go into the closet and pull out a pair of blue jeans and all those little wire hangers drop to the floor, do I pick them up and put them back where they're supposed to be? Or do I say, I'm too important for that, that's somebody else's job? Do I put the shopping cart back where the shopping cart is supposed to go in the parking lot at the grocery store? Or do I leave that for somebody else? And what I find is that when I make a lot of those choices correctly, that I can maintain this posture of surrender and that I feel God's presence in my life. You cannot live off the laurels of a spiritual awakening. You have to renew it every day. And my self-will is constantly looking for an opening to get back control of my life. And my inclination is that when my life starts going well again, which it did right as soon as I got sober, and all of the cash and prizes start flowing into my life, my inclination is to say, thanks God, I got it from here, and then take the wheel of the car and drive it off the cliff again. But the trick is, how do we stay in that posture of surrender, even when good things are happening, even when we're not desperate, we're not forced onto our knees to beg God for help in our lives? Addiction is about abuse of power. We ultimately have to turn our power over to our higher power. When I was active, I was like a big truck. I was very ambitious, even though I was an addict. I was like a big truck stuck in a ditch with the wheels spinning, with smoke coming out of the headers and the pipes and making a lot of noise and flames, but I was going nowhere. It was all activity and no progress. And part of turning your life over is learning to be quiet with yourself. And there's a line from Isaiah that was very influential for me when I first got sober. Be still and know that I am God. And that means you don't have to fix everything. You don't have to reach outside of yourself to fix something that is wrong inside of yourself. And when I'm in that place of peace and calm, I become much more efficient as a human being. And I become a much more effective human being. And what I know now is that everything I've ever done in my life that comes from self-will has turned meaningless into wormwood and bile. and that everything that I've done that is enduring, that is important, that is meaningful in my life has come from a spiritual place. And the trick is, how do you stay in that spiritual place even when your life is going well? And that's the discipline that we need to exercise over ourselves. And God exercises it over us. When we make God exercise it over us, it's called humiliation. When we exercise it over ourselves, it's called humility. And all of us have to now approach life with humility. And that means extending compassion and kindness to people around us, and particularly those people who don't agree with us. Everybody who talks to us, every encounter that we have, is God talking to us, teaching us a lesson. Even somebody who throws you a finger or an obscene gesture when you're driving because you took a wrong turn or something, that I have to say to myself when that happens to me, what is God trying to teach me from this? What am I supposed to learn from this circumstance? We have to address all of each other that way. We have to all understand that we're God's children, and that each one of us is a vector through which God is communicating to all others. And that all the relationships you have in your life, the people who love you, but even the people who don't like you and the people you don't like, that they're all messengers from God. And when we understand this, we see that the giant divisions that are now polarizing in our country and humanity, that they're ultimately the product of that self-will. And our job as individuals is to overcome self-will, to turn our lives over to that higher power, to do the next right thing, and to show kindness and compassion and respect to people with whom we disagree, and to try to love them, which is effort. Love ultimately is effort, and to make that effort towards other human beings. And in that way, we can begin to bridge the divide that separates humanity. And when we do that, the amount that we can accomplish will be almost indescribable. Abraham Lincoln, whose statue we can see on the National Mall, he was a wood splitter. He worked in the woods and he made rails, and he was known as the rail cutter. He was a very big man. He was 6'5" or 6'6", and he was tremendously strong. He could beat anybody in his state in wrestling and in feats of physical strength. But he was very famous for being able to cut down trees fast. He was asked one time that if he had to cut down a very, very big oak tree, what his strategy would be. And he had 5 hours to do it. He said, I'd spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. That is a metaphor for life. When we work on perfecting our spiritual condition, we become much more effective human beings and much more effective leaders in our community. So I urge all of you to try to do something every day for somebody that you don't like, and then don't tell anybody about it. God bless you, and thank you. If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com. Hey everybody, I'm in Fulton County, Georgia, and I'm here with Jasmine and Infinity, her little girl, and we're at Auntie Angie's house. And it's a house for pregnant mothers who want to bring their babies to term, and here Jasmine has created an organic garden here where they're doing home gardening and growing their own food. It's just a beautiful, magical place. And my old friend Angela Stent King, who's part of Dr. King's family, has started this. And tell us the reason that you were inspired to start this.
I was inspired to start this because I started looking at the numbers, and I started hearing a lot of people, me and my partner Celeste Beal, who is the daughter of Alveda King. We started looking at the numbers, and the numbers were astounding. In Fulton County, Georgia alone, during 2020, when there were no COVID restrictions put in place in abortion clinics, 6,070 babies were aborted in Fulton County. Out of those 6,070 babies aborted, 4,550 of those babies aborted were Black babies. Here's the thing. We are putting a lot of funding and a lot of resources to mothers who make a choice, but not the mothers who choose life. We are so grateful that our friend Bob Kennedy came by to see the work that we're doing, to start this new initiative behind supporting mothers who actually do make the choice of choosing life. It's so rewarding because here, not only are we changing lives, but we are also saving lives. When you look on a national level, it is astounding. This is Black genocide. In New York alone, there are more Black babies being aborted than they are being born. I urge all of you to look at your public health website, do the numbers, look at the statistics. The same people that are telling us that Black Lives Matter are turning around and putting funding into Black life being exterminated. Guys, it's time to do something different. And guess what? I think I'm about to go independent with my buddy, Bobby Kennedy.
Well, let me ask you this. One of the big crises that people are starting to talk about now is maternal fatalities with Black women. In fact, Black women at the highest college level are 3 times as likely to die, to suffer maternal death, as white women who are high school graduates. And we're seeing that this disproportionate impacts or deprivation of good medical treatment for Black Americans, and tell us how that feeds into
that is so true. The Black maternal health crisis is another thing that we're facing. It's up on the whitehouse.gov right now, where it says exactly what Mr. Kennedy said. Black women are 3 times likely to die giving birth to their children, regardless of income or education. That is a statement that is so profound. Why is this happening? That's kind of like saying all the Black horses are dying or all the Black cows are dying. It's just not natural. That's another reason why we created Auntie Angie's House, to get back to better natural birthing methods. I remember when my grandmother gave birth to my aunts and uncles, it was 10 of them. They were all born in the shed. They weren't born in a hospital. Everybody was healthy. We don't know what's happening, but we know that the solution to the Black maternal health crisis is not abortion. It's life resources like Auntie Angie's House.
And you understand, I believe that it should be a woman's life to choose, right to choose. I think I mentioned I'd be telling people to bring babies to term that don't want to do that, but I also think the government should be doing everything it can to allow women who want to bring their babies to term to make sure that they have good health care.
And that's why I invited you to here today. I already knew your position, but this is about a choice. So women that make a choice don't always choose to terminate. What about the women that choose life? And that's why we're here today.
We need to take care of them too.
Yes.
That's right. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
In the 90s, the Democratic Party shifted right. The entire working class, red states and blue states, have been left behind structurally and are suffering, right? And so Republicans make promises to the working class and Democrats make promises to the working class. And neither of them get their needs met because both parties have abandoned the working class, including now the working poor. See, a lot of people who think they're working class, they're not working class. Like if you actually look at what they have in their savings compared to what the average person had spending wise in their savings in like the 70s, 1960s, 50s, right? We're actually the working poor. Most of us who think that we're working class are actually $600 to $1,000 away from an unrecoverable emergency. That's not the working man's fault. The working man didn't do that. Because of technology, we're actually 4 times as productive as we used to be. But because nobody's looking out for the working class, they have literally shrunken in terms of their wealth into the working poor. The meritocracy has failed because wages have not kept up with expenses. And that has a lot to do with the destruction of the countervailing powers to crony capitalists. See, crony capitalists have always been there. But what we had was a strong working class, labor union, sector whereby people could collectively bargain to the point where wages kept track with expenses. That was destroyed in this country. And it's no coincidence that our wages have stagnated since the 80s because that's when this separation began. We're gonna make sure that we remedy that. And I'm not gonna serve my corporate donors. I'm gonna serve the people who are actually voting for me. I think a lot of politics forgets that, like, you realize that our most popular president ever was FDR. Without these big donor bases, without these corporate sponsorships, without these super PACs, what did he do? Just freaking serve. Just serve. The Kennedys would have been on that path as well. Just serve. Look at the people, serve them. Take care of their needs, and they're gonna show up to the polls, and they're gonna overwhelm you. They're gonna overwhelm the opposition to get you back into office. When you lift the economy from the bottom, everybody wins. That's the America that we gotta get back to.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
Obviously, you've been so outspoken on how we handled COVID and Big Pharma. How should we react if they do mask mandates all over again?
It's one of the first things that I did when they had mask mandates the last time around, as I said, let's see what the actual science says about masks. And what the actual science says that masks don't work to prevent the spread of respiratory viruses. And there's study after study, in fact, the CDC has admitted that they're not science-based. And you had just one unelected bureaucrat who says that 1 week masks don't work. He said it privately and publicly.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask.
And then a month later, everybody put them on. And then a week after that, put 2 on. Black Americans really shouldered the disproportionate burden of the injury from these mandates. They closed 3.3 million businesses. 41% of Black-owned businesses that closed will never reopen. The arbitrariness and capriciousness of those mandates was obvious to anybody who had any kind of skepticism. If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
So, well, let's take one thing that has happened, which is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who was basically going after as an alternative to Biden, is now running as an independent. How does that impact the race?
I think you're going to see several people or forces. We already see that unfolding, Joe Lieberman and others, on a third party.
No labels, yeah.
A third party effort. And that reflects deep dissatisfaction with what the two parties have been offering up. And so there will be. Whether they get any traction remains to be seen, but it certainly gives people an outlet right now to register their displeasure. And what usually happens in American politics is that one of the two major parties eventually absorbs the protest movements that rise up as third parties. But you will see third parties, and you will see them gather some strength just because people don't believe they've been well served by what's been served up, you might say.
Well, RFK Jr. seems to be coming at a cost right now to the Biden administration. Is that surprising to you, or?
No, because people this way, they could think they could vote for a protest about what they think of the huge abuses, especially happened during COVID, without going to the Republicans. So what the Republicans end up doing is going to have an enormous impact on third parties. But even in 1920, going back then, when the Republicans won a huge landslide, the biggest in American history up to that point, you still had a very active third party. A socialist, who was a hero of Bernie Sanders, a fellow named Eugene Debs, ran for president from a penitentiary cell in Atlanta. He was arrested during World War I for opposing it, and he got over 1 million votes, 4% of the vote. So yes, there will be a third party.
Power of the people.
Can they do any tricks?
Yes, they can.
It's,
See something? Риком, молодец. Бред. Рика. Вот, сидеть. Оп. Пошла. Пошла. Оп. Молодец.
there's a sacrifice that everyone, including myself, have to make if we're going to reunite America. We're going to have to surrender the kind of political addiction that is ultimately at the root of all of these divisions. And that's the addiction to taking sides. Our nation's renewal is going to begin when we start to treat each other with respect. Only then will we be able to step outside our tired, stuck debates. We will listen not just to the other side, but to those who are apart from any side. My promise to you as president is that I'm going to do this on every issue. I'm going to listen to the stakeholders from every side and beyond any side. I'm going to uphold my moral convictions, of course, absolutely, but I'll hold my own opinions lightly. I'll look at the evidence and the arguments, and I'll choose not the easy path, not the established path, but the right path.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com. I was born 9 years after the end of World War II, and I grew up in a generation that was, with my parents who were fixated on that, what happened. And my father, at that time, the resolution in the minds of most Americans, and I think people around the world, is that there had been something wrong with the German people. That, the Germans had been particularly susceptible to this kind of demagoguery and to following a powerful leader and to industrializing cruelty and murder. And my father always differed with that. My father said, this is not a German problem. This can happen to all of us. We're all just inches away from barbarity. And the thing that keeps us safe in this country are the institutions of our democracy, our Constitution. It's not our nature. Our nature has to be restrained. And that comes through self-restraint, but it also, the beauty of our country is that we devise these institutions that are designed to allow us to flourish, but at the same time, not to give us enough freedom to flourish, but also create enough order to keep us from collapsing into barbarity. So, one of the other things that my father talked about from when I was little, he would ask us this question: if you were the family and Anne Frank came to your door and asked you to hide her, would you be one of the people who hid her and risked your own life, or would you be one of the people who turned her in? And of course we would all say, well, of course we would hide Anne Frank and take the risk. But that's been something kind of a lesson, a challenge that has always been near the forefront of my mind, that if a totalitarian system ever occurs in the United States, which my father thought was quite possible, he was conscious about how fragile democracy actually is, that would I be one of the ones who would resist the totalitarianism, or would I be one of the people who went along with it? Would I be one of the people who was at the train station in, Krakow or even Berlin, and saw people being shipped off to camps and just put my head down and pretend I didn't see it, because talking about it would be destructive to my career and maybe my freedom and even my life. That's been a challenge that my father gave to me and all of my brothers and sisters, and it's something that I've never forgotten.
A lot of us would like to believe we would resist in that situation, but the reality is most of us wouldn't. And that's a good thing to think about. That human nature is such that we're selfish, even when there's an atrocity going on all around us.
And we also, we have the capacity to deceive ourselves. And all of us tend to kind of judge ourselves by our intentions and our actions.
What have you learned about life from your father, Robert F. Kennedy?
First of all, I'll say this about my uncle, because, you know, I'm going to apply that question to my uncle and my father. My uncle was asked when he first met Jackie Bouvier, who later became Jackie Kennedy. She was a reporter for a newspaper, and she was doing, she had a kind of column where she'd do these kind of pithy interviews with both famous people and kind of man in the street interviews. And she was interviewing him, and she asked him what she thought, what he believed his best quality was, his strongest virtue. And she thought that he would say courage, because he had been a war hero. He was the only president who, and this is when he was senator, by the way, who received the Purple Heart. And, you know, he had a very kind of famous story of him as a hero in World War II. And then he had come home and he had written a book on moral courage among American politicians and won the Pulitzer Prize. That book profiles in courage, and which was a series of incidents where American political leaders made decisions to embrace principle, even though their careers were at stake, and in most cases were destroyed by their choice. She thought he was going to say courage, but he didn't. He said curiosity. And I think, you know, looking back at his life, that that it was true, and that was the quality that allowed him to put himself in the shoes of his adversaries. And he always said that if the only way that we're going to have peace is if we're able to put ourselves in the shoes of our adversaries, understand their behavior and their context. And that's why he was able to, you know, he was able to resist the intelligence apparatus and the military during the Bay of Pigs, when they said, you've got to send in the Essex, the aircraft carrier. And he said no, even though he'd only been in 2 months in office. He was able to stand up to them because he was able to put himself in the shoes of both Castro and Khrushchev and understand there's got to be another solution to this. And then during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was able to do it when the narrative was, okay, Khrushchev acted in a way as an aggressor to put missiles in our hemisphere. How dare he do that? And Jack and my father were able to say, well, wait a minute, he's doing that because we put missiles in Turkey and Italy that were right on, you know, and the Turkish ones right on the Russian border. And they then made a secret deal with Dobrynin, with Ambassador Dobrynin, and, you know, with Khrushchev, to remove the missiles in Turkey if he moved the Jupiter missiles from Turkey, so long as Khrushchev removed them from Cuba. There were 13 men on the what they call the ENCON committee, which was the group of people who were deciding, you know, what the action was, what they were going to do to end the Cuban Missile Crisis. And virtually, and of those men, 11 of them wanted to invade and wanted to bomb and invade. And it was Jack, and then later on my father and Bob McNamara, who were the only people who were with him, because he was able to see the world from Khrushchev's point of view. He believed that there was another solution, and then he also had the moral courage. So my father, you know, to get back to your question, famously said that moral courage is the most important quality, and it's more rare than courage on the football field or courage in battle than physical courage. It's much more difficult to come by, but it's the most important quality in a human being.
Why do you support Mr. Kennedy?
His views on keeping our children healthy, and as a mother, that's a big one.
I follow that man wherever he goes, whatever party he's in. It's his character.
Kennedy seems to be the only candidate against censorship.
The whole corporate takeover of the country. We have a dystopian democracy, and he's going to expose it.
When you're the candidate, he's going to fight for all what's good for America.
and he's the man. He's the only one.
I just love hearing Bobby Kennedy speak because he wants to heal everything. He wants to bring everyone together. He wants to heal governmental agencies. He wants to do the right thing for everyone.
It turns my stomach to think that the Biden administration is refusing to give Kennedy Secret Service protection. Any candidate reaches 15%, they get it. Kennedy is at 19, and they still didn't give it to him. He's got to pay 30% of all his donations for his own security. I think that's disgusting. That makes me sick of the DNC. And I'm a registered Democrat all my life.
I lived in the U.S. for 20 years as a green card holder, and 10 years ago, after watching back, I said that if Kennedy ever runs for president, then I would become a U.S. citizen. And so when he announced in March or April, whenever that was, I put in my paperwork, and in August, I became a U.S. citizen right here in Philadelphia so that I could vote for Kennedy.
It's about time that we have a candidate that's going to buck the system and really speak to our needs, not corporate interests, but us. And the central idea of us is what drove me here, where you're going to speak for the needs of this nation, of this land, where we're not caught up in what the corporate has to say or lobbyists, but what do the American people need? And he said it all today, and I'm extremely happy. I'm excited. And we hope this fire catches all over the nation.
The fact that he's been so successful as an environmental lawyer, I think he's dead on all the issues. There's not one thing I don't agree with him on, and that he really stands for the people and for the principles that our nation is based on, or is supposed to be based on. So that's why I'm deeply moved to be here.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com. Hey everybody, I'm sitting here with one of my oldest friends, Lou Gossett Jr.
What's your name, boy?
Come on, let's see what you got. And I don't know, we've known each other probably 50 years. And we're in Atlanta, but he just showed me this amazing picture of him and his grandmother. Great-grandmother, who was born a slave. No idea how old she was because her birthday was not in the Bible, the family Bible. But this is him when he was 17 years old at the Actors Studio, right on Broadway. And Lou told me that he was raised in Coney Island. This is a news story that he's never told me before. He was raised in Coney Island, surrounded in a Jewish community, surrounded by Holocaust survivors, and that he had no idea until 1966 that there was any such thing as anti-black prejudice. And then he went to Hollywood. The day that he got there, the studio, Lou Wasserman's studio, gave him a big eggshell-colored convertible.
Oh yeah, there's a Hertz rent-a-car, which comes from the contract. But in the movie was Donna Winter, Gig Young, Melvin Douglas, and myself. And we were doing the first movie of the week, and Baxter. We did the first movie of the week that Universal ever produced with Lou Wasserman.
He immediately got pulled over. He said he met every policeman
Anyway, who do you think you are? Hey, I am. I'm Louis Gossett from Brooklyn.
And then he goes to the hotel, and he was in the, it was the Beverly Hills Hotel.
Beverly Hills Hotel, the presidential suite.
And the doorman told him, don't worry about those guys. They're a bunch of Okies from Oklahoma. They don't know any better than that. And, you know, so that, but the bellman gave him a map of the House of the Stars. And he went over and saw, you saw Errol Flynn's house?
Errol Flynn's house, Merle Oberon. And within 10 minutes of doing that, right behind the Beverly Hills Hotel, I got handcuffed to a tree.
So as soon as he went out of the hotel, he got arrested again.
For walking in Beverly Hills after 9 o'clock. So that was my first obvious resistance to racism. I've never forgotten that day, but I swear that the way I was living and the way I felt is the way I feel today. We need one another more than we don't. We need to understand, rather than be understood, to bring light when there's darkness, etc.
It's time to heal the divide.
That's right, we have to, otherwise we're all lost.
If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
Democrats getting another huge wake-up call on their march to the radical left. Moderate Dem Senator Joe Manchin ready to ditch his party and become an independent.
I think the business of politics, Hoppy, has gotten so absolutely toxic. I'm thinking seriously, what's the best? For me, I have to have peace of mind, basically. The brand has become so bad, the D brand and R brand. You've heard me say a million times, I'm not a Washington Democrat.
And as Joe Manchin talks about the Democratic Party brand becoming toxic, here's the latest example of the party's intolerance. Liberals are going into a rage at Woody Harrelson after the actor wore an RFK Jr. presidential hat. Brian, they're very afraid of RFK. I mean, he's not going to win, but it's something about him that is annoying this party.
It's hard to dismiss a guy who's his name is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who was, I think, 13 years old when his dad was assassinated and stood right there. So you can't dismiss him and say he's some fringe Kennedy. Number two is Joe Rogan also. Really impressed with RFK Jr., who's got tremendous street cred.
Joe Rogan, the big Democrat, Joe Rogan.
Well, he voted for Bernie Sanders. But he's all over the place. I mean, the guy that said I'd never vote for Donald Trump now says I'll probably interview him. So Joe Rogan's power can't be underestimated. And then with Woody Harrelson's situation, that's one of the most likable guys you'll ever meet. Number two is he already shocked people with his SNL monologue. And number three is, why can't he make his own decisions? We're past cancel culture. I'm telling you, we've turned the page. You're not going to cancel people because of who they support. I'm telling you, America has moved on. And good luck with trying to marginalize that guy. That guy can act, Woody Harrelson.
Jessica, but to Brian's point, why is the party so dismissive of people that agree with you all on 90% of the things, but feel like there needs to be a different direction? I mean, it's kind of like the same for black men. Like, typically used to be the base with Democrats, and they're saying, look, you're not caring about issues that matter to us. It's like, oh, no, we still got the black women. What is it about that? Or Joe Rogan, he's really not a Democrat. He's a socialist Democrat. It's like he agrees with you guys on 80% of the thing. Why not try to retain those voters?
I want every possible vote that's available. We'll take anybody. And that's what happened in 2020. There were a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump who came over and voted for Joe Biden. Welcome you with open arms. And I hope that RFK Jr. supports Joe Biden, whose name is going to be on that ballot, and that Joe Rogan makes a good choice and also votes for Joe Biden there. What I'm saying about RFK when I raise, like, you're going on Joe Rogan's show, is that RFK Jr. is not running the campaign of a man who's serious about winning the Democratic nomination. He's serious about getting a lot of clicks, a lot of press hits, but he's hanging out with people who do not speak to the Democratic base and doing interviews with them. He's talking about issues that are certainly important, but are not top of the list for us. I think the border is extremely important, but when you look at the priorities for Democratic voters, the economy, talking about the Dobbs ruling, climate change, and he's filming himself down in Arizona, that's not going to get it done for us. Also, he doesn't agree with 90% of our platform. What's gone on with him over decades of being anti-vax that has caused his family an incredible amount of hurt and discomfort and difficulty that they've had to come out against him time after time after time. And Woody Harrelson...
He was right on COVID, a lot of it.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. He said that more people died from the vaccine from the disease.
He can't get on CNN and MSNBC. They said they have no interest in interviewing.
They probably had rules about it that, for instance, he would get fact-checked. Like if he brought up, for instance, that there's water that turns kids trans because of some study with frogs, or whatever other kooky thing he has. And we've had a lot of people on our network. Byron York has said it's complete crackpot in terms of these beliefs. It's really a betrayal of the Kennedy brand. And I think when he hangs out at 14, 15%.
Here's the problem with the Kennedy brand.
But
about Ted Kennedy.
Of the Camelot brand of it, which is what he's trying to do. And also, Woody Harrelson, I'm sure, is great friends with Cheryl Hines. I wish I was friends with Cheryl Hines. But it doesn't mean that RFK Jr. would be a good president.
Joe Manchin tried to appeal to the Democratic base that Jessica talks about. And now he's getting ready to lose his seat.
Yeah, so he's trying to distance himself from the Democratic brand, saying that it's toxic, and many, many parts of it are very toxic. But this is actually about Joe Manchin's brand when he plays with becoming a Republican. In West Virginia, he's about to lose his Senate seat. Jim Justice, the very popular Republican governor, has a 64% approval rating there. Joe Manchin's approval is only at 40%, and his disapproval is at 53%. And why is he unpopular? Because he voted for the almost $1 trillion Inflation Reduction Act, which at the time it was passed, we knew was a handout to these green climate change projects, which are completely corrupt and not actually environmentally friendly. And now the president is finally admitting that, yeah, we actually named that in a fraudulent fashion. We called it the Inflation Reduction Act because Americans are suffering with inflation. But now we're trying to appeal to our climate change base for an election. So therefore, we're going to go back and actually tell people what's in the bill and that it's actually a climate change green handout corruption bill. And so that's why Joe Manchin is saying, yeah, maybe I'll toy with this whole Republican thing because he's about to lose his race.
I think he might run for president at no labels. Because he might have
or
a
that
choice.
too, but he's also running. If he runs, it's because he's losing a Senate seat.
Let me get the judge in. Judge, if he runs third party, is this good for the Republicans or no?
Well, I don't know who it's good for, to be honest with you. I mean, Manchin has kind of danced and straddled the fence a lot. You know, the crazy part of it is, you know, they're celebrating the one-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act, and he's not going to the celebration when he actually signed the bill. I mean, supported the bill.
He got the pen.
And I think
Biden gave him the pen, remember?
Yeah. Well, okay. And then, you know, is he ready to ditch the party? No. He says he's ready to the party is ditching him. Okay, because Jim Justice is going to win. There's no question about he's losing. So what viability does he have? The only viability he has is to run as a third-party, no-labels candidate. Okay, let's talk about the Dems. I am so sick and tired of the haters. They are haters. All they do is they hate you. They began the unfriending of you. Anything you do, they hate. They want to censor you. I've never seen a party like that. And let me say something about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I know him. I was a DA when he ran the environmental program in Westchester. He was respected. I respected him. He was very serious about what he was doing. A lot of his family is vaxxed. There are certain vaccinations he's not in support of. And it's too bad if the rest of the Kennedys feel bad about him. The bottom line is he's doing whatever he can. And when he takes that video at the border and talks about what is going on, he's doing more than Joe Biden is. And Joe Biden was in where was he? New Mexico this week for 2 days. He couldn't go to the border. Kamala is so ditzy, she doesn't even know her job is supposed to be overseeing the border. So let's get straight about this. The Democrats are intolerant of anyone who doesn't toe the Joe Biden corruption line. And that's all I have to say about it.
But on the other side, Donald Trump had no primary. The RNC didn't support it. There were no debates.
What's this got to do with a primary?
Please don't unfriend me.
I don't even have social media.
Yeah, don't do that.
She doesn't follow you anyway.
We gotta go.
Because I'm not on.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and journalist Glenn Greenwald went head-to-head on Greenwald's show over RFK's now-deleted tweet praising Roger Waters. Here's a snippet of that exchange.
If you live in any of these other countries, and you're gay, for example, you can be killed for that. Israel is the only place where you have freedom. If you're a transvestite, if you have other kind of dissident views, you'd much rather be in Israel than any other place.
I get that argument, but go ahead. You can finish. Well, I just wanted to ask you because
Israel, and we need to have the same standard for judging Israel as we judge other Arab countries. We should, and Israel is going into the West Bank and killing children. It's never doing that deliberately. Never. And nobody has ever said it is.
Well, a lot of people have said it is.
If you recall, RFK Jr. found himself in hot water after he first applauded the former Pink Floyd bassist for his stance on the coronavirus and his criticism of the war in Ukraine. But Rogers' pro-Palestinian position has not sat well with supporters of Israel, leading the candidate to walk back his praise. And of course, he didn't just walk back his praise. He described Roger Waters' performances, his statement, as anti-Semitic. He said that he applied a different standard to Israel as opposed to other countries in the Middle East. And this back and forth, which I strongly recommend people watch in full. It was a really great interview. Glenn asked some really excellent, fair, but tough questions. He really doubled down on that position, saying, as you heard in the clip, that Israel, that other Arab countries intentionally kill Israeli children, whereas Israel never does the same. We heard Glenn push back, saying many people say that that is not, in fact, the case. I think something like 50 Palestinian children have been killed in the course of this past year, including one just last week who was shot while in a car on a way to, I believe, a family event, shot next to his mother. You know, these are really disputed questions, and of course, the way that Roger Waters keeps framing these this issue rankles people precisely because it is an echo of the kinds of talking points one frequently sees from an Israel lobby, whose interest, of course, is in maintaining the enormous amount, billions of dollars in funding that America sends to that country, while many people in Israel have a better standard of living in the United States. So Glenn went on to ask RFK Jr. to distinguish his attitude toward Israel and the funding issues there from his attitude in Ukraine, saying if you were to go around the United States and ask, the question isn't who is better, the Israelis or the Palestinians. The question is, why are we in the United States transferring billions of dollars of aid each year to a country, Israel, whose citizens in many ways enjoy a higher standard of living than a lot of the ways American citizens live? What is your argument for why we should be sending so much money to Israel but not to Ukraine? And I think the controversy is that many viewers of this episode did not feel like RFK Jr.'s response really reckoned with the inconsistency between how he's treated.
Did he really continue to endorse aid to Israel?
Yeah. Yes. He says we have the kind of narrative about how we have a special relationship. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. It's the only place that you can live and not get killed if you're gay. Those kind of pat arguments, kind of ignoring
I don't support foreign aid at all, and there are actually a lot of Republicans who don't either, who have spoken out, who are not certainly not coming at this from like a leftist perspective, but think it's perfectly conservative to advocate closing off aid to foreign countries, including Israel. Yeah, I think you were just about to get to this. It was interesting to hear RFK Jr. Make a defense of Israel that sounds to me like the same kind of defense that liberals generally make of the need to protect Ukraine. They do lead, especially when they're talking to their own tribe. They start with Russia has a terrible record on LGBT rights. Yep. That's the main. I mean, this is something that gets brought up a lot by there's a kind of liberal neocon axis that wants to delegitimize criticisms of continued war kind of aid in general on a lot of issues in the Middle East. So we have to, they didn't recognize same-sex marriage there, so that necessitates
we can drop all these bombs and take their oil.
It's a very similar argument. So
and Glenn said exactly that, by the way. I mean, it's really worth watching in full. Glenn said many defenders of our aid to Ukraine and our military support of Ukraine say that it is a democracy and Russia is an autocracy. How do you distinguish those arguments from the arguments you're making there? And, RFK Jr., in all fairness, he did say repeatedly, I don't think any criticism of Israeli policy should be characterized as anti-Semitic. The problem is he then turned around and did seem to characterize very substantive criticism of Israeli policy. Glenn Greenwald pointed to the fact that Israel has become a very conservative right-wing country of late in terms of its leadership. It's criticized the settlements, the lack of plausibility behind a two-state solution at this point because of these illegal settlements.
He supports a two-state solution, I believe.
Right, but the left at this point does not. The issue is, and what Glenn was bringing up, is that it's become implausible because of all of these illegal Israeli settlements. The landmass is too settled, non-contiguous, and at this point, people want there to be a one-state solution where Palestinians are treated equally under the law, which is in direct tension with the idea of there being an explicitly Israeli state.
Is that what the Palestinians want?
There's self-determination, and it's a mixed bag, but that is increasingly the move that people are going to as the two-state solution becomes untenable. And
you
the
say on the
status
left specifically.
Yeah, among many of RFK Jr. supporters, which is why this is such a contentious issue right now on the internet. And the line that RFK Jr. specifically kept coming back to is we cannot have a different standard for criticism of Israel versus criticism of some of these Arab nations. And while I would agree with that, I think it's a claim that does not bear out. What is the evidence that Roger Waters or anybody else is not happy to criticize a given Arab nation for its standards on human rights or women's rights or any of the like? But moreover, isn't there a question specifically about Israel because of the volume of U.S. aid to that particular country? And isn't what we're talking about with Ukraine and Israel and all of these countries is how much money America should be giving to support whatever is going on in those nations? Our ability or need to speak on what happens in some random part of the world is really there's nothing there unless it is the case that we are supporting what's going on there through our tax dollars, especially when there's so many people, as he's made the case for Ukraine funding, so many people domestically that could really use that money. And so it's something that he's going to have to continue to wrestle with. Eventually, I think he summed it up by saying, you're raising some good questions, Glenn, and we can move on. But I think it really does undermine a lot of people's confidence, not just in his attitude to Israel-Palestine, but his understanding of what's going on in Ukraine. How consistent is he going to be when these issues continue to come up globally if he's not able to analogize the reasons why he objects to the funding in Ukraine to why he should potentially object to funding in other parts of the world? Yeah, for sure. It seems like a misread of the both from the left perspective and the kind of America First perspective that he, to the extent he's trying to be a hybrid candidate that speaks to both disaffected populace on both sides. It's a populism on both sides that wants more more attention being paid to the problems at home, not because the problems in the rest of the world aren't serious, but because we have to be honest about our ability to fix them in the way that we have, and have to reckon with all the ways, some well-intentioned, some not well-intentioned, efforts by the American government have made things worse, have led to really unsavory consequences. That's putting it delicately. So maybe he'll reflect on that more after talking it out with Glenn. Yeah. And we're actually going to have an interview with RFK Jr. later this week. So you won't want to miss that. Have more details on it very soon. But it is on the books. More Rising right after this.